Hi folks, Jeremy Klein here from Outdoors NB Maritime Outdoors. I want to talk about kayak stability and kayak selection when it comes to sit on top fishing. A lot of the groups I'm involved with on Facebook, this question comes up a lot. So I thought it would be great to shed a little bit of light on what stability is and what type of stability we need and where we're paddling. So where do I come up with my information? Just to give you a little bit of background on what I consider qualifies me to talk about it. I'm a Paddle Canada instructor. Mechanical engineering technologist, so I kind of delve into materials selection and strength of materials and things like that. And at one point in time, I had here in Canada, Transport Canada has commercial captain's licenses. I had a limited masters, which is really just the first. We had a 90-ton whale watching boat, so I had taken all the courses at the local college here. So I had what was it, 100-ton license. There was a lot of information in that about stability, and in Paddle Canada we go into a lot of stuff about kayak stability. So that's kind of my background. I've been involved in a whole bunch of different stuff. Paddle Canada board of directors, Canoe Kayak New Brunswick board of directors, and I organized a sea kayak symposium down in Charlotte County here in New Brunswick. So I'm real passionate about teaching people about kayaking. There's basically in kayaks two types of stability, and this can be a contentious issue with some people because really what creates stability in a kayak is the paddler. And the more contact and control that paddler has over that kayak, the more stable they'll be because they create the stability. A sea kayak is very narrow, and depending on the design of the hull, it can be extremely what we would consider tippy in the initial stages of stability. Initial stability may not be very good, but what that means is now I have more control over rolling the kayak from side to side, which is where I gain stability in very dynamic water or very rough conditions where the amplitude of the waves is very high. The primary focus for a sit-on-top kayak is to be very initially stable in flat water, and all of that is important in selecting what I'm going to use for fishing. So the intent is it's super stable. I can stand up and cast from it in flat water, right? The wider and flatter the boat is, or the more stable it is on a flat surface, the less control I have. Now that's fine because the intent with most of these things isn't to go out on very open water where what's called fetch length, or how far can the wind blow to create waves, where that fetch length isn't very, very far. So we would consider bodies of water where there's not a lot of fetch length. How far can the wind blow unobstructed from objects, ground, man-made objects, trees? How far can it blow over the water to create larger and larger waves, to build energy on the top of the water and down into the water to create larger and larger waves? So primarily, most places we're going to be fishing are sheltered, but there are a raft of people that use these guys out in open water, like off of Miami, off of North Carolina, off of New Jersey, off of New York, even off of Maine. I have friends that use them here in New Brunswick on the Bay of Fundy, which can be some of the most dynamic waters in the world because we have the highest tides here, which creates fast current. So as the tide, the tidal wave runs kind of just behind the pole of the moon around the earth as the earth rotates. It comes into the Bay of Fundy, it fills the Bay of Fundy, but as it's coming in it creates a lot of horizontal movement, flood and ebb, flow, so current. So when current goes against wind, it'll make the waves stand up, and we have sharper waves, higher amplitude, and lower, shorter wavelength. So, very dynamic conditions, a very initially stable kayak, I have no control. And how we maintain stability in very dynamic conditions is we use that rolling capability in the kayak to edge. We call it edging. We're not leaning. My head is going to stay over the center of gravity of the boat. My lower body is going to edge the boat, and this is my upper body. So my hips, my butt, my legs are going to roll the boat towards the wave. My upper body is going to stay over top of the center of gravity. So my head actually, when you watch somebody edging, if there are waves coming this way, I'm going to edge my boat. I'm using my lower half of my body. My upper half of my body is going to stay over the center of gravity of the boat. So very dynamic conditions, ideally, I would have a narrower kayak and not as flat on the bottom. But you have to balance initial stability and control in fishing kayaks, because I need the ability to stand and cast, which is harder to do in a very narrow sea kayak. So there needs to be a balance. So how do we do that? So let's look at some design features here. So when on various social media outlets, people say, I'm looking for a very stable fishing kayak, what should I get? Most times, and it's important to know what you're asking for. Are you looking to be able to stand up in the kayak and it not be tippy? Or are you asking these things because where you're going is going to be very rough? Those are going to be two different designs. Those are going to be two different stability aspects. So if you're looking to stand up and cast, you're in flat sheltered water or mostly sheltered water, or it's not going to be rough, this is the design here. Or similar to, you see how it's sitting on flat wood on a flat surface, so we can represent, this wood could represent flat water, okay? I can't take this and I can't make it roll on its side at all. So this is going to be very stable in flat water. So it's almost a catamaran design. This is the Old Town Autopilot 136. And the Sportsman line, with a couple of exceptions, those two exceptions being the Big Water and the Salty, most of the Sportsman and Topwater have this almost like a W, like a catamaran style hull. And that creates a lot of stability in flat water. But I have a lot less control if I need it. If things get very dynamic, I cannot edge the boat into rougher conditions. Flat water, mostly flat water, or sheltered water where it can be a little bit dynamic. My waves aren't going to be quite as severe. The Sportsmans and the Top Waters, the primary Sportsman designs are going to be very, very stable. You're going to be able to stand, especially from this autopilot where it's so heavy, the 136 and the 120, I'll be able to stand and cast all day. I'll be able to stand and cast from the front, the side, the back, whatever I want to do jumping jacks in it if I want. Very initially stable for flat water. Now, if I'm going to go in more open water where the waves are going to be of a longer wavelength and a higher amplitude, then I'm going to want to have more control, and that's going to mean less initial stability. And I'm sorry that we can't have both, because I'm going to get the most control in very dynamic waters from a very narrow kayak that has very little initial stability, because I have maximum control over it. Okay, so on the Bay of Fundy, when it's really rough, this is what I want. And this is not for, this is just an example. I wouldn't use this for fishing, obviously, but when things are going to get hairy, I don't want initial stability at all, because that means I'm going to end up upside down. But less initial stability, more control is key. So this guy's not half as wide as the Big Water over here, which we're going to get to in a second, but I have so much more control over that. And you can see how the bottom is definitely not flat. That gives me control. I can bring that over on its side and stay there, right? I can't do that in a really wide flat bottom boat. Now, so we got to kind of balance the both worlds to maintain stability, to be able to fish from and still have some control. So this is on the Sportsman line with Old Town. This is the Big Water 132, and this is the pedal drive version. Look at the bottom of this. It gives me still width, but now I have a little bit of a V hull, and that's important because now I can bring the boat over, not really far. So it's still going to be fairly initially stable, but you can see that there's from the bottom of the keel to the chine of the hull, right on the very edge right here, from here, the chine of the hull, to the edge of the keel, I have a little bit of change in the, I guess we want to call it the elevation of the hull. That allows me to edge the boat over slightly from one side to the other, and that gives me a little bit more control. So in more dynamic conditions, I can shift my center of gravity of the boat. I'm going to maintain my upper body center of gravity over the center of gravity of the boat, but my lower body can shift the weight of the boat a little bit so that I may prevent capsize by making the boat a little bit more stable. So if you're going into more open water, something like the Big Water 132 is what you want to look for. If you're worried about your boat being very tippy and you're going to stay in more sheltered water, then the Top Waters and the main Sportsman line with that catamaran W style hull is going to be what you want. So there's people online that say this is a horrible boat, it's not a stable boat. It's actually more stable if you're an experienced paddler in it that can control it. And that is the whole intent. More open water, Big Water. Flat water, you want the flat bottom contact points of the Top Waters and the Sportsman. I hope this gives you guys a little bit of information, helps you out selecting on the Old Town line what you want, and I hope, more than anything, I hope it manages expectations when you buy your boat. Okay, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.